Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Sam Laprade. I'm going to be your host today for the Capacity Building Institute webinar that happens here every single month. I'm very excited about what we're offering today. We have an opportunity as well to learn more about CBI. And of course, we've got a great topic today, one that I'm very passionate about, all about communicating with volunteers. And of course, Alex Keenan is going to join us. But we're going to start with the wonderful Hannah Rockburn. Hannah, are you there? There
Yes,
she
I
is.
am. Hey.
Give us the scoop, my friend. Tell us all about CBI.
So, hi everyone. My name's Hannah, and I'm the operations manager for the Peace and Environment Resource Center here in Ottawa, Ontario. We serve as the charitable partner for Sustainable Capacity Solutions, and we're just here to help provide resources, training, and networking opportunities for the programming, such as this webinar for the Capacity Building Institute. So the Capacity Building Institute is now operating as a program under Sustainable Capacity Solutions. And this exciting transition will allow us to continue delivering our comprehensive training, the coaching, and the mentorship to nonprofit staff and volunteers nationwide. And our mission is to provide equal opportunity and access to capacity building training for all environmental leaders across Canada. And this move will strengthen our commitment to making high quality support more accessible than ever for our sector. So through our tailored training, we empower individuals and organizations at every stage of their journey, equipping them with skills and knowledge to drive this lasting environmental change. And our approach focuses on 6 core capacity building themes. So we have financial management and fund development, governance and board, volunteer engagement and human resources, communications and outreach, risk management, legal issues, and leadership and organizational culture. So right now you're part of one of our free monthly capacity building webinar series. So this is a great resource for expanding your knowledge and strengthening your network. These sessions take place on the 3rd Tuesday of each month from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. And they're just designed to enhance your capacity building literacy in a practical and relatable manner. Beyond our webinars, we also are actively training over 50 youth in developing their nonprofit leadership skills and supporting over 30 different ENGOs across Canada. Through this program, the youth are receiving one-on-one mentoring, they're building their professional networks, and they're gaining top-tier training from all of our incredible experts that we have here at the Institute. And we are very fortunate to have a fantastic roster of trainers and coaches that do support our programs with new connections and guest speakers that join us every year. So we are joined with 2 of them tonight, Sam and Alex, as well as we have Rob and Barb and Dwayne that all have multiple different experiences and strengths and are great coaches to have to get feedback on. And we're very grateful for their contributions and are excited to continue learning from them each year. We also just want to thank our funders and supporters that we are able to subsidize the training, making this more financially accessible to leaders of small shop grassroots organizations that often miss out on professional development due to these financial barriers. And their support just ensures that the vital capacity building opportunities remain inclusive and affordable and impactful for your organizations that are in the weeds on the ground, driving the environmental change in your communities. And as always, we encourage you to reach out, learn more about our training opportunities or how you can be involved within the network, either as a participant or a trainer. You can sign up to our monthly newsletters where you'll receive updates on upcoming sessions, any networking opportunities, and what we're doing within the network. Also, you can connect with us through our various social media accounts. So you will notice if you've already been joined to some before, we are in the process of merging our social medias all under Sustainable Capacity Solutions. So you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn as of right now under Sustainable Capacity Solutions. Some dates to save. So next month we will be with Mina, and we'll learn about integrating AI to streamline nonprofits. So that will be on May 20th. And then another one that's really exciting that you won't want to miss is in June. We will have building relationships with family foundations. So we have representatives from Chalkers Foundation, Charles Ivy Foundation, as well as Johansson Larson Family Foundation to come and speak with you on a panel to talk about how you can build relationships with their organizations and tips along securing funding with their organizations and what they have available. You can register for these events on our website at capacitybuilding.ca/events. I'll also put it in the chat afterwards as well. And with that, I will pass it back to Sam to take us off with our webinar tonight.
Wonderful as always, my friend. I appreciate you joining us, of course, and sharing all that great information about CBI. We're joining one of our other wonderful friends here at CBI, and that's Alex Keenan. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Hello, Sam. I'm doing
There
great.
you
It's good to be here
are.
again.
I'm so excited. So we're going to be talking about communicating with volunteers, but give us a little bit of your background, Alex. Let us know what your journey's been.
I've been in the nonprofit world for a little over 2 decades now as a volunteer, as an executive, as a board member. I work very closely with nonprofits, including through the Capacity Building Institute as a trainer. And some of the services that I offer, my day job, I am a communications trainer and consultant and a facilitator. So a few of the things I do is I offer communications and public speaking training to professionals and to teams. I do communication strategy with nonprofits, so you can use the resources that you have available to you to make strategic progress towards your goals. And I help groups have better conversations, whether within themselves or with the audiences that they're trying to reach. And so my passion is really helping people connect with each other in a way that makes the world better and that feels good.
And you do such a lovely job. And I love that you're
I
here for
think.
the topic that I'm so passionate about, communicating with volunteers. There's such an important audience for all of us in this world. And I find sometimes they tend to not get the attention that they need. We might take them for granted a little bit. And so I'm hoping today is all about sort of providing those techniques, those strategies to keep volunteers engaged. And just an aside, because of course my brain always goes to fundraising, Alex, you know that. So we know a lot of times that philanthropy is defined as time, talent, and treasure. And there's many of your volunteers that turn around and they're your best donors as well. And a lot of people, sort of may not understand that correlation. So it's really important for us to respect the time and the talent that so many of these volunteers are bringing in terms of the commitment to an organization. So kick us off. Maybe talk a little bit about some of those barriers. Why are maybe we're not communicating with volunteers as much as we need to, Alex?
Well, okay, so I think the first principle that we need to think about is whenever you're talking about communication, you want to understand your audience. And your audience, when you're talking about volunteers, it varies, right? Different people come from, different demographics. They, might have different ages, different abilities, different cultural backgrounds. Their relationship to your organization is not necessarily the same from one person to the next. As an organization, you might have a lot of volunteers who have kind of shallow engagement. You might have a handful of people who are very, very engaged. You might have kind of a hybrid. You might have somewhere in between. And so the first thing is when we're going from one context to the next, you can't just assume that you're going to do the same stuff. You need to really be thinking about the audience, that group of volunteers that you have, what they need and how they relate to your organization, what their motivations are. A high school student who is trying to get their public community service hours is not going to be coming from the same place as someone who has a lifelong commitment to your cause. They can get there, they can develop that lifelong commitment, but you have to nurture it. You can't assume it. And so the first barrier, I think, is understanding who the person is. How do we meet them where they are? And that takes some effort. It takes some time, and it takes a commitment, right? Not every organization can necessarily afford to hire a full-time or even a part-time volunteer coordinator, but you really do need to have someone who is thinking about the volunteers, and that person needs to be chosen carefully. They need to be someone who is organized, who is reliable, and who has great communication and interpersonal skills. You need to have someone with those who's looking after your volunteers and making sure that they are taken care of, that communication is ongoing and is clear, and that their needs are met.
Because I think, it's one thing we think about all the different audiences that we would be speaking to as nonprofit leaders. And, the volunteers in many organizations are the only reason the organization exists, right?
Mhm.
So that clear communication is really important. How often are we communicating with volunteers, Alex? What's a good cadence?
Oh, that's a great question. And honestly, Sam, it depends, right?
Mhm.
I would say at least monthly is a good cadence to maybe just send out a newsletter, say, hey, here's what's going on. Here are ways that you can get involved. It really depends on how intense you want their commitment to be. It depends how much capacity you have as an organization to coordinate them. But a monthly touch point, I think, is probably a good starting point to just, to keep yourself in their minds and help them feel connected to the organization.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, I really respect your answer, because there's some organizations that if something's going on, then we don't want to wait a whole month to tell them, right? So
That's right.
sometimes we have something we need to share, depending on, I think about, organizations that are maybe working in food security or something like that, where they can't wait the month, right? So, um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about what we're saying to them, because I think so often as volunteers, we're wanting to make sure they're appreciated, but I also want to make sure, and this always kept me a little bit up at night, I'll be honest, using their time as wisely as possible. So not only from a communications perspective, but when they were on the ground, whether they were working frontline or whether they were board members or whatever the sort of role that they had, never did I want to volunteer going home or thinking to themselves that their time wasn't valued. So
Mhm.
from a communications perspective, how are we communicating to make sure that the role is the right role and to ensure that the time is well spent?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's important to have an initial touch point. Ensure that the person understands what is expected of them. And, different people have different preferences in terms of what they want out of their volunteer role. Some people are, maybe new to it. They just want to show up and have you tell them what to do. And
Mhm.
other people are going to want to have, they might chafe like that kind of rigid role. And so they want to have some more say in it. And often you will give someone more flexibility the longer that they've been volunteering with you, or the more you know them or know of them. But generally, the initial touch point, you want someone talking to them and making sure they understand what their role is, that they have whatever they need for it. And so really important documentation to have, for example, if they're going to be interacting with the public, is a guide, a communication guide, a style
Mhm.
guide. If you have someone who's going out and talking to the public, here's the language that we use, here's the messaging that we use, here's anything that you should probably avoid.
Yeah.
If they are helping you with, social media or anything that's going to be in print, there should be a style guide. Here are the colors on the fonts and stuff. So that everything can be consistent and they know what's expected of them, and you don't have them kind of going off
Yeah.
on a tangent and just doing their own thing that doesn't make sense for your organization. So that initial, what is the documentation to help them understand who, what, when, where, why, how of their role, and making sure that someone is checking in with them to see if they need anything, a thank you before you send them on their way. A follow-up afterwards is really nice to keep them coming back. And I think depending on how much of an effort that they've put in, some meaningful feedback can be helpful. If someone puts a bunch of time into a project, saying that was great is nice, but being able to give them tangible, here's what we really appreciated about that. Here's the outcome. Here's the impact that your work had, is so powerful to keep people motivated. Seeing how they are part of something bigger and that their efforts genuinely matter, is really helpful. And even if that's, you had 20 people come out and volunteer for an event, you send out an email afterwards with a photo of the group and say, here's what we were able to raise at this event. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much. To show that appreciation and help them feel that they really are part of it and that their participation matters.
It's such a good point because there's been times where I've actually printed those pictures. I pulled it up on a bulletin board and, I remember that day. I think those little things can go a
Mm,
long way.
yeah.
Um, and I think as well, like when we're engaging volunteers, it's they might be really excited when they first come. It's to keep that excitement and let it build as well. They become very much feeling like they're part of a family, if you will, that's come together for a greater cause. How are we keeping donors engaged? I know in the past I've done, donor appreciate or volunteer appreciation days where they can bring their family and do a tour if it's an appropriate place to tour. There's been little gifts given, little, certificates, those kinds of things. Those things do go a long way, right, Alex?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, having some way that they can, enjoy the experience beyond just the time that they spend with you. And that can look different. I used to be a lawyer, and so I say it depends a lot, but it depends. And so if you have, a local group having an event is so wonderful. I am a volunteer with a nonprofit here that once a year at least. They have a volunteer appreciation event. There is food. You get to chat. I have actually, that was how I met Dwayne Taylor, who's also a
Oh,
trainer
I
at
love that.
CBI now. Yeah, I met him at one of these events. And so those are wonderful to it really helps you feel appreciated. I also on the board of a couple organizations that are more geographically spread out. So we can't just bring our volunteers together, but one thing we might do is have, a Zoom event, sometimes people are a little tired of Zoom events, but sometimes it's fun. There's this game you can play on your phone called Kahoot, and it's
I
like
love Kahoot.
it's just a fun way
I
to
know, I love
connect with
it.
people, and so you can do that virtually. So having fun things is really valuable. You
Yeah,
also want to be thinking about who are your volunteers and what are they looking for. So if you have a retiree, they might be looking for a different kind of social event and connection than someone who is starting their career and maybe is looking for business and career networking. And if you can
yeah.
offer networking to someone at the beginning of their career, that's a really valuable way to say thank you. That might not be as useful to someone who is later on in their career.
Yeah.
Giving someone, I think, a title that they can, put on their LinkedIn, on their CV, and feel like they have a role within this
Oh, love that.
organization is so powerful because that keeps them coming back too, right? Like, I am part of this. I'm not just a body that showed up on Saturday. I have this role within this
Yeah.
organization. And then as you go offering them, like asking people, what do you want and how do you want to be involved and what do you want to contribute? Can make sure that you're doing it right rather than just assuming what people want.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and I think that I always think I've done my job if someone goes to a cocktail party and they say, "Oh, I'm a volunteer," and they tell, whoever they've just met
Mhm.
for the first time, that's one of the first things that comes out of their mouth, that they're so proud to be a volunteer somewhere,
Yeah,
right? So you
yeah.
want to be able to create that atmosphere. Streamlining this stuff is really important. I mean, we think about anyone that's ever done any mass communications. There are tools that we can use, so many tools. Walk me through any suggestions that you might have to make this not only effective communications, but easy on us, Alex. Help me out.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, okay. So having a newsletter platform is really helpful to, push
Mhm.
out, your e-bulletins, your updates to people. I I currently use MailChimp most of the time. They're they're removing some of the features that I really like from the free version. So
Oh,
I don't like, I maybe next time I talk to you, I'll have a different suggestion,
yeah,
but it is a pretty easy, plug, drag and drop kind of thing. You can make them
yeah,
look pretty. So you can send out a newsletter and it's free if you have a relatively small audience. And so that's one way to just be connected with people regularly. Slack is one that I find really good for messaging. And so you can have, it's called a Slack workspace, and everyone joins there. They can send direct messages to each other. You can have direct messages, like little group chats, private group chats within it. You can have different topics and you make announcements on there. It's something that you can have on your desktop and your phone. You can send documents through it. Really handy. Yes, I see Hannah has in the chat Slack Pro.
yeah,
It's free for nonprofits. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
which is
So it's
great.
a fantastic tool. Very it's a little bit tricky sometimes for people to add themselves to it.
Mhm.
But then once you're in it, it's so easy to use. And
Yeah,
there is a free version and there's the pro version, which you can get for free as a nonprofit.
yeah, I love
Those are,
that.
yeah. Google Drive is one of my go-tos for document sharing. I was with an organization for a while that used Dropbox, and it was terrible. And half of our conversations were about how much we hated Dropbox.
Oh,
Google Docs, Google Drive is great for sharing different kind of
yeah.
files. You're not sending multiple versions of a document back and forth and trying to figure out which is the most recent
Oh,
version. So it's wonderful to use. There you can also get a Google Pro account or whatever it's called as a nonprofit. They make it a little bit difficult to reach them and to set that up, but you can get a full Google suite as a nonprofit
nice,
organization.
nice.
I do
Yeah,
know this is something that I've been thinking about lately, is some people are less and less comfortable using Google, considering data mining concerns and
right.
privacy concerns, especially because it's a US company at this point in history. So one that I actually heard about just the other day, and I haven't checked out yet, but there's a Canadian alternative called sync.com, SYNC. I'll put that in the chat.
Oh,
And it's an encrypted file sharing syncing service based in Canada. So I haven't tried it yet, so I'm not in a position to recommend it. I will be checking it out, and if those privacy concerns are relevant to people, it might be something that they want to check out as well.
yeah, I love that obviously it's timely to be thinking about
Yeah.
those alternatives for sure. Lots of great tool options there for us. I get to ask Alex all these fantastic questions, but we're going to turn the tables in a minute and we're going to
Yeah.
ask you to ask questions of Alex as well. So start thinking about those questions. You can pop them in the Q&A there. Hannah will help me out, make sure that I don't miss any of them. But in terms of obviously engaging volunteers, we want to keep them for a long time. We think about that onboarding process and how much energy we put into anybody that we're onboarding. It really is about retaining those volunteers as well. I'm always thinking about donors as well, but retaining those volunteers is just as effective, to be honest, as retaining donors because they sometimes have incredible corporate history. I bumped into a donor. I did it again. I bumped into a volunteer that volunteered when I was with the Ottawa Mission. And, he was there for 15 years and was so invested, came a couple times a week to volunteer at the organization. But that corporate history that he held, it was incredible to really engage with someone that was that passionate.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about how we keep people for long periods of time.
Yeah. So one principle that I think it's important to use is so Robert Cialdini, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He it talks about kind of principles of persuasion and how you engage people. And one of the things he talks about is consistency. So people want to be seen as consistent in their behavior. If they do something one time, they want to be seen to do it this again. And you can kind of use this to remind people. Hey, we really appreciated when you volunteered for us at last month's event. It would be great to see you there again, right? So you can use this kind of psychological principle to, to get them to do it again. Just remind them, hey, like in the past, you've helped us out with this. We'd love it if you did it again. And that little thing can be such a powerful nudge. Actually, someone used that on me just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, and you can get people to kind of ramp up their engagement. So you start with a little ask. Hey, will you, will you come out and stand at our table at the I'm in Ottawa, so the Glebe Garage Sale. Will you
Yeah.
come in and operate our table for a couple of hours at the Glebe Garage Sale in May? And then once they've done that, you contact them and you say, hey, we really appreciated you, manning that table. Would you be willing to come and volunteer at this full day event? Right? And so you can kind of ramp up their engagement as they become more and more invested in the organization. The key, though, is you need to show that you are invested in them as well.
True.
And that comes again from those displays of appreciation. Can you give them a highlight, a spotlight in your newsletter or on your social media? Are you thanking them regularly? Are you offering them meaningful feedback if they're doing intense work for you? Are you having appreciation events? Are you getting back to them in a timely manner when they
Right.
contact you. That's a big one, right? And that's where that volunteer coordinator can really come in, or having someone who is there if a volunteer gets in touch to be getting back to them right away to let them
Yeah.
know. And so it's really it's continuous communication with them, it's appreciation, and it's showing them that they matter. Reminding them if you can have data or visualizations of like, here's how you contributed to making a difference, and can show that to them. That makes a huge difference.
It
And
does, because
really,
then
yeah,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, they've got a story to tell then too,
That's
right?
right.
So
Yeah,
it's not only I volunteered here, but I volunteered here, and did you know that we've, helped 12 kids go to camp this year, or whatever it is, right? So,
yeah, yeah.
or, we've helped plant this many trees, or whatever the passion is. I want to talk to you a little bit about volunteer surveys. I've used these quite effectively in the past as well, getting feedback from volunteers. The one thing I'll say is many people do volunteer surveys, but then they don't do anything with the results. So if
Yeah.
volunteers are saying, "Oh, I only want to hear from you, once a week or whatever it is, or once a month," and then you continue to send them a daily email, then it's kind of like, okay, well, you didn't hear me, right? So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
got to make sure, I think, from my perspective, if you're going to do a survey like that, you have to be expecting feedback and be able to action the feedback, right, Alex?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And so you want to think carefully about what questions you're asking
Mhm.
beforehand, because if there's a question that you're not able to action, then you're
Yeah.
just going to make people more resentful that you asked it and didn't act on it.
Exactly.
And if it's a really long survey that you're not going to look at, that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. So even if it's
Yeah.
a 5-question survey, the 5 most actionable, relevant questions,
Mhm.
it's a good start. I think hearing from your volunteers is so important. I'm not a huge fan of survey just because I find they don't tend to get a huge response rate.
Mm.
And you do need to be conscious of the people who respond are going to be the ones who have the strongest feelings about
That's
things.
so
And,
true.
right?
Yeah.
And so if you get a bunch of negativity, that doesn't mean that all your volunteers are
Yeah.
miserable. It means that the people who are miserable filled
Mhm.
out that survey. So
Yeah.
one thing that I have seen done pretty nicely is to have volunteer town halls, whether that's in person or virtually. And it's an event, we're gonna have a little bit of like chit chat and socializing. There's gonna be snacks if it's in person, and we want you to ask your questions of the
Mhm.
organization, and then we'll give you a little bit of information about what's going on, and and have a chance to hear what you care about. And so it's just a little bit less formal, and it's more fun than filling out
And
a survey.
profiling people in the website and
Yeah.
newsletter, it's similar to what you're saying, is you give people
Mhm.
an opportunity to see other volunteers, which I
Yeah.
love about the town hall, is that they're all there together. And so it
Right.
creates that community. And I think by, whether it's once a month or once every couple of months in your newsletter, profiling a volunteer as well, it's
Right.
something that they're putting up on their fridge and showing their friends. But other volunteers see that, and maybe they see
Mhm.
themselves reflected as well.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah. And
lots
actually
of
talking to people, you get more context for their feedback. If you say, how satisfied are you on a scale of 1 to 5? And they say 3, like you don't know where that 3 is coming from. Whereas if you're having a conversation with people, you can ask them questions.
Yeah. Any advice for us if we're just getting started, Alex? Maybe we've only got, 15 or 20 volunteers, maybe not even that many, and we're just getting started. What advice would you have for us?
Mhm. I think so the first thing you want to do is be clear on what you want those volunteers to do.
Mhm.
Because I think there's nothing more frustrating for a volunteer. Some people really, they have an idea, they want to go for it. But most people, the first thing they show up is they want to get to, they want to get oriented, they want to understand what's going on. And so it's helpful if you have tasks for them, and you have clarity about what those tasks are. So I think the first thing you want to do before you even get in touch with your volunteers is have at least a baseline understanding of what are we trying to achieve, and what do we need people to do in order to achieve that. And so then when people show up, you can say, okay, we need someone to tackle this task. We need, is anyone interested in doing that? Like, we need someone to tackle this. Can someone do that?
Yeah.
And so then there's this sense of the volunteers that, okay, these folks know what they're doing. I'm in
Mhm.
good hands. And then as you see what they can do, as they see what they can do and see what you're about, there can be maybe a little bit more flexibility for them to say, hey, I've got an idea. Can I take this on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to make it, Linda. I just watching Hannah's, yeah, how to approach potential volunteers is a great
Mm,
topic as well that was brought up in the chat. So if you're, if you sort of have a really organization you're really passionate about, you're working really hard, but you want to bring volunteers in, and you see people in the community and you're thinking they would be great. Any advice on how we're approaching them, Alex? What's that first call?
so yeah, identifying individual people and approaching them is so powerful because if you just go, hey, I'm looking for volunteers, anyone want to come? Then it takes a little bit of effort and courage for someone to step forward. But if you tap on someone and say, hey, I would really love if you came to help us out. That's powerful, right? And especially if you can identify, hey, I think you're really good at this. Like if you can identify why you want
Right.
them to volunteer, that feels so good, right? Oh, you want me because of my
Yeah,
talents. So that's
exactly.
the key. If you've got somebody and you know that they'll be a good volunteer because of this ability, because of this characteristic that they have, just tell them, hey, I
Yeah.
think you're great at this, and it would really be helpful if you could bring that. So we're having a
But
meeting. Come to the meeting. I'll give you a
yeah,
drive to the meeting. However you can lower the barriers for that person, and at the same time kind of bump up their sense of connection. You're going to
yeah,
increase
it's
the odds that they
wonderful.
show up for you.
And it's a chance too as well to diversify the people around the table, right? Like finding different skill sets, finding different communities to get involved, and making sure that everyone feels represented at the table as
Hmm.
well. And I always say to people, fill your seat. If you're a volunteer and you're going off a board, I always say to people, try to find and fill your seat, but don't fill it with someone like you. Find
Right.
somebody that brings new skills, a fresh perspective to, let's say, a board position, for instance. What are your thoughts on people that are looking maybe to move on from an organization and they've got kind of that fill your seat philosophy?
That's a great question. Yeah, so I think, well, we tend to surround ourselves with people that we resonate with. So your immediate kind of social circle is probably going to be people who are sort of like you. Now, if you're filling a particular niche within that organization, then it's incredibly helpful to be able to go back to your network and say, hey, we need someone else who can do what I do.
Yeah,
If you feel like maybe um, fresh air is needed. Maybe you need to start playing like 6 degrees of separation. Like talk to,
love that.
someone who's plugged into other networks and say, hey, we're looking
Mhm.
for someone who can satisfy, this. Do you know anybody? Or do you know anybody who might know anybody? And sometimes, if you're
Mhm.
looking for something different, then you might need to look beyond your normal networks. And one thing that I actually learned, going back to Dwayne Taylor, one of the
Yeah.
other CBI
Yeah.
trainers. He and I co-facilitated a workshop at CBI last year, and he was talking about the barriers that we often put up to engagement by the people that we actually need. And so,
Oh,
for example, the example that he used was if you have an organization that is doing outreach to kids who are like teenagers, youth who are, in danger of, getting in trouble with the law or something like that. The
mhm.
people you probably want mentoring are people who have been in that position and understand what
Right.
they're going through, right? But if your organization requires a clean criminal record check to, in order to volunteer, you are automatically eliminating those really helpful mentors
Yeah.
from your pool of volunteers. And so is there a way that you can structure things so people don't need to surmount that barrier? So those people that are going to be really helpful can be part of it. And then you need to think about, okay, like the people that we're looking for, where are they? Who knows them? How do they communicate? Who do they trust? Like, how do we need to talk to them in order to, help them feel connected and feel safe and feel ready to engage with us?
It's so simple and so brilliant.
Yeah,
Like when you
yeah,
say it out loud, because you think, well, of course, those would be the best people.
yeah.
but we've put all these barriers in place.
That's right. Yeah.
And society has put them in place, right? So yeah, no, that's a brilliant thought. Happy to take anybody's question as well. If you have any questions, just pop them in the chat or in the questions and answers, and we'll make sure to get to them. I'm of course working off my phone today, which is not the plan. I'm going to look up here. Oh, I love this question. Jordan has asked, is a volunteer committee as effective as a volunteer coordinator? Alex, what are your thoughts?
That is a great question. Mm-mm. So I think they each have benefits and drawbacks.
Yeah,
We've probably heard of the phrase death by committee. If
yeah.
decisions need to get made and there's no one who is responsible for making that decision, then things can go nowhere. And so you need to have very clear, if you've got a committee, how are decisions made? How do we make sure that things keep moving forward? And everybody needs to be clear about that. The benefit of a volunteer committee is that if one person isn't available, someone else can step in and fill in for them. So you need to make sure that everyone in that committee is empowered to take action when needed. So if that normally maybe there's one person who is normally responsible for this, but they're sick, they're on vacation, what have you, they've got personal stuff going on, someone else can step in and they've been trained, there's some kind of plan that's been put in place to train and prepare that person to take over those responsibilities. So in that case, the committee can be great.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I'm hearing as well, like I think at the top of our conversation, talking about that onboarding, right? So really important in that situation that there would be a collective idea of how that committee was working.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And talk to me a little bit about, when we think about volunteers, and it tends to go in cycles where people will sort of volunteer and they'll maybe give a year of their time. Talk to me a little bit about the recognition when somebody does sort of say, okay, my time is up here. Because I think, that warm hello also needs to be a warm goodbye, because you never know when they're going to come back again, right? It doesn't mean that maybe they're gone forever. So we don't want to leave a bad taste in people's mouths about, oh, that was a really bad experience and they didn't care if I ever came back.
Right. Yeah, I think that comes back to, those thank yous, that recognition. A little bit of public recognition is wonderful, whether it's on social media, through your newsletter, at an event can be really wonderful, especially if someone has been, kind of a consistent volunteer to give them a shout out. I do know some people who would be uncomfortable with that, and hopefully you've gotten to know that person enough to know if that would be welcome. Most people would appreciate it. And so it's really, it's knowing the person, right? But yes, those thank yous and maybe a little bit of follow up. If the person has been very deeply involved, you might want to do an exit interview, just like you would with a staff member. Get there, what did you enjoy working on? What was the most meaningful thing you learned? What feedback do you have for us? What would you like the next person in your position to know? Giving them an opportunity to give you feedback and to reflect on that experience shows, again, that you are committed to them just like they've been committed to you.
Yeah, I love that. We have another really great question from John. He's asking about a volunteer handbook, those policies, Alex. My God.
Yes.
I have to tell you, I remember working at the Ottawa Humane Society, and I was so grateful that we had policies, because it could get a bit uncomfortable sometimes. So can you walk us through a little bit about how important it is? Part of, I guess, that onboarding too, if you've got those strong policies.
Former lawyer. I'm also a big fan of policies. It provides clarity and it provides predictability and consistency. And so, situations come up. You always hope that they won't, and maybe everyone in your organization is lovely, but situations can come up and you want to be ready to deal with them. And sometimes you have to deal with them just, on the spot on short notice. And so you don't want to have a debate about how do we deal with this. And so thinking about things in advance, having it out in writing, Make sure that, everyone can agree, okay, this is fair. Even if I don't like the way that this has been, if there's a situation and they don't like how it's been resolved, if it's clear that this is the policy, then at least they can't say that they were, treated unfairly. So yeah, having a handbook of volunteer policy that deals with things like, reporting relationships, how to resolve conflicts. It's important if a volunteer answers to a certain person, but maybe that person is causing issues for them, there's an alternative pathway for them to, someone else that they can talk to within the organization. Now that all clearly laid out. A couple of the organizations that I'm with, we call it a people policy. So it's like human resources, but humans aren't a resource, right? They're people. And so
Right.
for employees and volunteers, there are sections that deal with, here are your rights as someone involved in our organization. If you feel that you've been treated unfairly, or if you're having a conflict with someone, here are the pathways that you can go to try and get resolution of those situations. And as soon as someone joins the organization, they're given a copy of that, so that they have it.
Yeah, and I think it goes into what Keenan's asking here, thoughts about my apologies, thoughts about stating a clear job task description for volunteers. That has served me well over the years. I'm sure, Alex, you feel the same way. Walk me through a little bit of what maybe that looks like.
Yeah, yeah. And so, obviously you have certain things that need to get done and you want to find someone to do it. And so, you have just something, and it can be very short, right? Something in writing of this role has a job title. They can put that job title on their resume. And here are the tasks that you do. Here's who if there's anything that you need to run by someone else before you actually take that action, you want to be clear about that. If you have to report on what you've done very clearly, how do you report and who do you report to? And maybe what's the time expectation is really important. Some people, they want to know, like, before they get into something, how much time am I expected to put into this? And so those are the kind of things you want to have, very clearly. I do think, especially when someone has been with your organization for a while, that it's good to be flexible and open to job crafting. So if someone has certain talents, certain abilities, certain things that they want to develop in themselves, that they can come to you and say, hey, I would like to do X, Y, and Z. Can I do that? And you sit down with them and craft that and let them, take that on, bring their own ideas. You might not want to do that with someone who just kind of like shows up on their first day because you don't know them, right? Here's what we need you to do today. Show us what you can do. But especially a trusted person who wants to bring their own ideas and shape the organization, I think having that flexibility is a really valuable way to help people feel appreciated and important.
Yeah, no, it's such a good example of what we can do to kind of make life a bit easier. It's almost that preventative stuff to make it a smooth experience for a volunteer, right? We want it to be a good experience at the end of the day. And you alluded to it at the beginning. In many cases, these are champions that are in the community speaking about organization. Let's make it easy and smooth for them off the top. And it's a time save as well. At the end of the day, you're not recreating the wheel for every single volunteer that walks in.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
So we only have a few minutes left. I can't believe how fast that goes. Every week I say the same thing. We've got a couple of Q&As here. Elizabeth Donovan's asking, at what point of growth or size should a nonprofit organization absolutely have a volunteer coordinator? I love this question, Elizabeth. Alex, over to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that is a great question, Elizabeth. So, okay, so a volunteer coordinator can look like different things. I think that as soon as your organization grows past the board of directors, you should have someone, even if it's just a director, who is designated as the touch point for your volunteers. So as soon as it's not just that core group of the board, you should have someone, right? And then in terms of, maybe when you should hire for it, I think probably your first step as you grow as an organization is to have, maybe one of your employees that is a part-time part of their job. In terms of, when you need a full-time, I honestly, I don't know that I can answer that.
Yeah, it's hard.
I think there are too many variables, but definitely like you should have a volunteer coordinator, whether they are a volunteer or a staff or just someone who, spends half an hour a week on it because you only have 3 volunteers.
Yeah.
There should be somebody.
And Elizabeth's got a great follow-up question here as well. Before you accept any volunteers, should you make sure you have the volunteer handbook you're describing, or should that be a further point in the organization's growth? Of course, you know me, Alex, I've got lots of opinions. I have an opinion on this, but we want to hear from you. What do you think?
I think that it's good to have it right from the get-go. It's not necessary. I would say when you're very small, typically you have the ability to kind of talk things through. When your volunteer base starts to grow, that should be something that you look at early on.
Yeah.
Early on. And you probably want to get feedback from your volunteers on it as well.
Yeah.
As you create it.
And I think it's one of those questions where it's the chicken and the egg, if you will. Like, what do you do first?
Yeah.
And the one piece of advice that I'll give you, because I certainly have fallen into this trap a million times, that I think to myself, no one else on the planet has ever developed this policy before. Well, of course they have.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's not recreate the wheel. And
That's
with
right.
all of the tools that are available to us now, Alex, this would be something that even in this day and age would be different even from 5 years ago. You could easily find something to give you a baseline and then grow it and maybe look at it semi-annually or annually
Yeah.
as to refreshing it to make sure it's up to date. Is that good
Exactly.
advice?
Yeah, yeah, and that's an excellent point, Sam. You need to be reviewing it on a regular basis because as you grow and as the dynamics within your organization change, you need to be able to adapt to that. So I know I've created these before, and I absolutely started with the template. I wasn't drafting any of these from scratch. And then you kind of look at here's what some other people have done. Here's what I like from these, and then let's look at our organization. Here's how we're structured. Here are our capabilities, and so here's what we're going to put in place for what rights, what privileges, what benefits volunteers get, and how who you communicate with and how if there's a problem. And then
And me, Alex.
We'll review it again next year.
Yeah, I apologize. I talked over you there.
Yeah, no, it's good.
You know me, I'm I'm a positive person. But I do want to just bring up something that I think is really important because certainly in my day, way back when the mountains were flat, when I started doing this work, we never talked about the opportunity. Sometimes we have to let a volunteer go. And it can be really challenging, and the communication around that. And that's one of the reasons that I think that volunteer handbook, that code of conduct, how we're going to conduct ourselves with you and how we expect you to conduct yourself with us. And I think it's a really important piece to know that sometimes it isn't a good match. And it doesn't mean that person's a bad person. It doesn't mean the organization's a bad organization. But sometimes just with life, it's not a good match. And it's important for the mandate of the organization, for the board of directors, for any crisis management, that also be managed. I could probably write a book about some of the situations that I've been in, where we've had to sort of say to someone, it's probably not a good match. Talk to me a little bit about how important that piece is.
Yeah. So, I mean, someone can walk away from your organization and say anything to anyone. And so you do want to make sure that you are safeguarding that relationship as much as you can and salvaging it. And there are definitely ways to do that. And I think one of the main things is in that conversation, lead with your values, right? So maybe, there's a value at your organization of doing really excellent work, and they have demonstrated that they just weren't as diligent as you would like in doing that work. And so you can say, it's really important to us that, we meet these standards. You might not use standards actually, but that our work has these characteristics. We've just found that, your work has not fit that. And we've enjoyed working with you, but we think it's not a good fit, right? And so you want to include values, validating that person. It's not that they're a bad person. It's just that they weren't a good fit for the values and the things that you consider, key for that role. And wish them well, I think is what it comes down to. Or if they have kind of fallen short of the kind of maybe like the ethical standards, right? It is so important for us that our volunteers do this because we work with vulnerable people, and like falling short of this can really harm them. And unfortunately, we're not able to, to keep you on because of this maybe lapse in judgment or whatever. And it doesn't necessarily need to be like a judgment on who they are as a person, but you did something that was not okay according to our values. We're not going to be able to continue working together. And I think kind of that like reserving judgment on who they are as a person is really key to preserving that relationship in some way. And it helps them know that it's not that they're irredeemable. It's that, you can't work with them at this point in time, but they could go on and change and do great work somewhere else with someone, with another organization.
I've never been more grateful for your skills with the law than I am today, because I hear the underlining, message, because it's important to have the language is important here, right? So
Yeah.
so I think that's really valuable. But I hear a little of the lawyers speak, but I really value it, because I think it's sometimes we can get around the table, and these are emotional conversations.
Yes.
And so the language is really, really key. Just following up on a conversation that we had a few minutes ago, one of our participants today has just indicated, even going into Chat GPT or any AI and saying, just write me 500 words on a volunteer policy, and kind of give you that quick, and it just gives you a start. I find I use it just to give me a start, just give me something that I can work with, and then I can adapt it to what makes sense for my organization. But it's a great point that those types of things are obviously available for us. So happy to have a more of a conversation about that. What are your thoughts on that?
So I agree. If you're feeling like you don't know where to start. And I appreciate that this person put draft in capital letters.
Yes.
You never want to just uncritically accept anything you pull out of ChatGPT. ChatGPT does not have emotional intelligence. And so you want to make sure that it makes sense for people, and it makes sense for your organization. You don't necessarily even need to go that route. You can Google, volunteer policy, small nonprofit, or if you know of some organizations that are similar to yours, you can maybe see if they have posted their volunteer policies online, or you can ask your friend who runs an organization if they would share their template with you. So you can get some that are that were made by people and just adapt that. But if that's not available to you, if you can't find what you're looking for, then AI is certainly another path that you can take. And they might be able to, if you know what inputs to ask for, they can maybe make something that's a little bit more customized than what you might get from someone else who has different needs.
I can't believe we've only got a couple minutes left. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you were like, I want to make sure today that I share with all of our friends at CBI joining us today about volunteer communications, and anything that's really important today for you?
Yeah, I'm just looking at my notes just to see if I've missed anything. So one thing that in my experience has been really important is transparency.
Oh,
And so as a a lifelong volunteer, I've been through many organizations, and sometimes things have gone very well, and sometimes things have gotten ugly. And when they get ugly, it tends to be because decisions come down from on high, and organizations start micromanaging their volunteers or making big changes and not being transparent about why those decisions are being made. And so if you decide that things need to go differently than what people are used to, you need to communicate about that. That might be the time, a very kind of like clear and kind email, or even better, that's where a town hall might come in. Hey, here's what we're facing. Here are the changes we think we need to make. We welcome your feedback before we implement this. Like, this isn't like things are changing today, but here's what we're looking at bringing in. We want to hear what you think, and we'll take your input seriously. Like letting people know the reasons for things is so important, because that helps get them on board, right? I think like most volunteers, they're not unreasonable. Like if budgetary things have changed, or you're under a new like legal regime, or like things just aren't working, and you're like, here's why, here's what we need to change. They'll be reasonable, but you got to talk to people. You can't just start telling them what to do, people resent it.
Such a good point. See, I'm so glad I asked. That's great. I knew there'd be something.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And we started off talking about sort of that gratitude for volunteers. I'd like to end there,
Mm,
those opportunities and fun ways to show gratitude. I remember one time when I was at the Ottawa Mission, we had the people working in the food service program, and they just, everybody walked away that day with, 3 or 4 little cookies that they had baked. It was a little ribbon around them. It was a very simple thing,
okay.
but
Yeah.
volunteers remember those little touches, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So those pieces of gratitude could be really creative. I know I worked in another organization, and we had youth paint them their Christmas cards that year, with a very simple little Christmas tree, template we had given the kids. But to have something that was personalized like that was really important for the volunteers, the board of directors. And I remember going a couple years later, and he still had it up on his shelf, this little card that one of the children had made. So those
Yeah.
touches really do, make a difference for people, for sure.
Right. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, most people volunteer because we want to feel connected to other people. And you keep people motivated by reinforcing that connection. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just before we let you go, Alex, what are you working on right now? What's exciting in Alex's world?
Oh my gosh. I'm getting my garden started. It's
Yes,
springtime. Yeah.
that's great.
It's springtime. I bought a house a couple of years ago, so I'm getting my garden started. And I'm slowly transitioning my lawn to native plants and food, and it's very, very
Oh,
exciting. Yeah.
oh, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I want to learn more about that. That's fantastic. That's great. Well, thank you so much. We really value, obviously, you being part of the team and sharing all the great input today. I wish that I would have heard this conversation 35 years ago. Would have been very helpful for me. But hearing it today is no less impactful for me. Thank you so much
It's been
for
such a pleasure.
spending
Yeah,
time
and
with
I want to
me.
thank everyone who asked questions and who was here
Yeah,
today.
great questions. I love the questions like that we got
Really
from
good.
not my questions. They were fantastic. Our participants asked some really great, very insightful questions. So we appreciate that. We always appreciate the lovely Hannah Rockburn. What will we do without Hannah? She is the glue that keeps us together. We love her so much. So thanks so much to Hannah for joining us. We're going to be seeing you next month. And my memory's failing me, Hannah. What are we talking about next month? I'm an old lady, Hannah. Help me out.
How artificial intelligence is used to streamline nonprofits. So we're having Mina come back.
Okay, so that's pretty cool because we kind of touched on it this week. So that's fantastic. We'll be able to talk about that in the month of May. What's the date on that, Hannah?
May 20th.
May 20th. I will be here, and we hope all of you will be here. We appreciate you joining us very much, and invite your friends. We want all of our friends to be coming all across the country, and we've had people even from other countries join us. So we always love that. Thank you so much. I'm Sam Laprade, and this has been your April webinar here at the CBI. Thanks, everyone. Take care.